Thank Hello, I'm Paul Douglas. In this video, you'll see me go through my... Now, I guess I'll start by just a very brief explanation of what is mixing. The idea is very, very simple. You've recorded a load of tracks, maybe drums, guitar, bass, piano, vocals, whatever. All mixing is make sure that all of those are at the right volume relative to each other. So making sure that nothing's overpowered anything else, you can hear everything clearly that you need to. That's it. That is mixing. Now, it sounds simple, but in practice it can get quite complicated. I try and keep it as simple as I possibly can. Now, I have a multi-stage process that I stick to. And the reason that I do that is to stop me sort of my mind wandering with stage zero, get organized. So the reason we do this is to just make your life easier later on in the mixing process. So you can see here that I always have a standard consistent way I arrange my tracks. I always have drums at the top, then bass, then guitars, then pianos or keys. If I had any vocals in this project, they would come next. And you can see I've used colours for all the tracks. Now, there are only 10 tracks in this project, so it's not that difficult to find a track that I'm looking for, but it's not unusual to have 100, maybe 200 tracks in a project. And if you've got that many, you need to have a way of locating tracks quickly. And having a color scheme is one way of doing that. So, I mean, there's several ways you can do this in Reaper. Right click on a track, we get a track color. You just pick a color out of there. Relatively new thing in Reaper, if you go to options and themes, theme adjuster, color controls, and then you can use these. So if I picked that one there, I could just pick a different color for it. And make sure they're all good enough. So make sure there are no clicks and pops or audio dropouts. Make sure, you know, if you're recording a guitar and you've got some amp hum before the guitar starts, make sure you cut that off. Go through and make sure each track is as good as it can be. This again will make your life much easier when you come to actually do the mixing proper. You hear people say the phrase "fix it in the mix" sometime. There's no such thing, really. You can sort of make compromises and improve things, but you know, it's much better to fix it on the way in. So if ultimately, if you find that you have a track that's unusable, you know, re-record it. Okay, so we're all prepared, we've got organized, all our tracks are as good as they can be. Let's switch to the mixing panel, which is what we're going to be mostly using here. So on the PC, the shortcut for that is Control M. And here we are. This is where we're going to be spending most of our time in the mixing process. Just one thing I will say about the layout of the mixer here. As I said before, we've not got that many tracks in this project, but if you did have loads and loads of tracks, there are some layout options you can use here. So I've got that auto arrange tracks in mixer set here, so that will auto arrange them, but you can take that off and just move tracks around self if you want. So you see I've moved that pad synth track over there. You can also set show multiple rows of tracks when size permits. This is important if you have a project with lots of tracks. So with that set on, if I just make that window smaller, you can see that it's arranged them into multiple rows. If I take that setting off and I do the same again, it doesn't do that. They disappear and you have a scroll bar to scroll through them. So if I had a project with many more tracks than this, what I would do is I would have that set. Stage one is gain staging. What is gain staging? Well, gain staging is when you have all the faders in their default positions. So that would be there. You know, you can see where the default position is by this line, these little lines here on the tracks where my mouse pointer is going. With all the faders in a straight line there, we want all the tracks to be the same volume or roughly the same volume. Why do we do that? Well, supposing you've gone through your song and you've got the levels pretty much where you want them, but you've had to turn one track right the way up to the top to get it at the correct volume. And then you start mixing and you realize, oh, actually, I need that track to be a little bit louder. Where'd you go? It's already at the top of the fader. So there's nothing you can do. So what we're trying to do with gain staging is make sure that there's a similar volume in that straight line with all the faders there, so we have enough room on the fader to make the track louder or quieter as we see fit. It's essentially just making your life easier for the next step. So that's gain staging. There are a couple of ways I do gain staging in Reaper. If you have a plugin on the track, so let's pick this guitar as an example here. So I have Bias FX on this track, making the guitar sound. We open that up, I can control how loud that track is using this master output here. So if it was too loud, I can turn it down. If it was too quiet, I can turn it up like that. If you don't have a plugin on the track, we can add a plugin to control the volume. So if I add a plugin there, and let's just search for volume adjustment. There we go. So you can see here currently that plugin will increase the volume by 6 dBs. Take it down, I can make it go up. So just by using this volume adjustment plugin, and that's all it does is alter the volume of the track, we can increase or decrease the volume with the faders all in that default position. So when you finish this, if we just go through, what you will see is with all the faders in this position, You'll play the song, the volume of all the tracks will be roughly the same. I'm just going to tell you about stage 2, which is optional, which is loading in a reference track. What's a reference track? You may have a particular sound that you're going for. There may be a song that you like, that you want the song. Stage 3 is an initial static mix, basic levels. So what we're going to do here is we're going to listen through to the song from beginning to end, maybe 2 times, and we're just going to move the faders just up or down to get the volumes relatively correct to each other. And we're not going to do anything complex, and we're trying to do this stage quickly. The idea is to quickly get a basic mix that sounds pretty good, where all the instruments sound okay, sound pretty good for 80 to 90% of the song. It's important to not dwell on this, and I would say don't take more than 15 minutes to do this stage. So we just play through the song, and we're just going to move faders as we see fit. This song is mixed, so I've already gone through all these stages, but you get the idea. That's all we're going to do. It's a very basic mix where we're just moving the faders to where everything sounds pretty good for most of the song, and that gives us an initial mix that we can build on. At this stage, I'm going to make a very important point about taking regular breaks throughout this whole process, especially if you're mixing on headphones like I do. Break, just 5 minutes. Stage 4, check headroom. What do I mean by that? So play through the loudest part of your song. The loudest part of my song here, right here, right at the end, the last chorus. And what you're looking for is these numbers here, how loud the whole song is on the master track. Now, if that master track, if it peaks at, say, above -6 dBs, create a submix bus, submix track. So how I would do that is I could create a track here. I could just call it submix. And what I can do is I'll then take the master send off all the tracks, and I'll route all the tracks, instead of to the master fader, I'll route them all to this submix here. And I guess the easiest way to do that is to use the routing matrix. So here we go. So you can see all my tracks are routed to the master fader there. I'm going to take all those off. Instead, I'm going to route everything to that submix that I just created. And the submix track itself is now the only one routed to the master fader. Now, so we can still hear everything. But what I can now do is control the level of the whole track using this submix fader. And so if this was peaking at above 6, I could use this one to bring it down so it doesn't. And the reason we're doing that is simply for headroom, to give us enough room so when we start messing around with the levels of individual tracks and we start making things louder, that we're never in any danger of peaking out on the master fader and getting distortion and ruining the track. Okay, then stage 5 is EQ. Now, very brief explanation of EQ. EQ is like a volume control for individual frequencies. So when you've got instruments that have a very similar frequency response, you can clear up fighting frequencies. You know, you could take out a bit of 2 kilohertz in one track and boost a bit of 3 kilohertz in another track. Very important to be able to have that very fine-grained control to make sure all your instruments sit nicely with each other in the mix. Now, I can't tell you what EQ moves to make in your music. That depends entirely on your music, and always be guided by your ears. You know, there are several standard EQ moves that you can make, But you know, if it's a standard move that everyone that you found a tutorial online that says, oh, you should do this, if it sounds rubbish in your song, then don't do it. You know, do something else instead. Always be guided by what it sounds like. Now, Reaper's EQ, the built-in EQ, re-EQ, is actually very, very good. So if we look here on this trem guitar left, I have this rear EQ plugin, and it's a fairly standard EQ plugin, and as I said, it's a pretty good one. So you've got 4 points that you can control here, and you can see the moves that I've made. So now this illustrates one of those standard EQ moves that I was talking about. So very often with melodic instruments, it's common to use what is called a high-pass filter. And that does what it says. It passes through high frequencies and it blocks all the rest. So if you've got a track like this where most of the low end is coming from the bass guitar and the bass drum, I don't want low end from other instruments interfering with that, like guitars. So I, round about that 100 hertz mark there, I pass everything, all the frequencies above it, and cut all the frequencies below it. And that's what that does. If I turn that off, you can see that frequency response there is just a straight line. Enable that, and yeah, cuts off all the low end in that instrument, so it doesn't fight with the bass. Again, this is a sort of standard-ish move for guitars. I've cut a little bit at 1K there, boosted a little bit at 2K, and boosted a little bit at 10K there. Now, I'm not going to go through a load of standard EQ moves because there are a million tutorials on online on YouTube that will give you that information. But again, it's very important. Be guided by your ears and your own song and your own idea of what you want to sound like. One last point to make about EQ. In general, favor cutting over boosting. So if you've got an option between cutting a frequency on one track and boosting it on another, I would favor cutting it on that one track. And if you're going to cut a frequency, so lower it, then make that cut a narrow cut. And if you're going to boost, make that a bit wider. So what that means is, if I just exaggerate here, so if I pull that right down, I can control how the shape of this curve here by using this bandwidth control. So when I say cut narrow, I mean, let's make that narrow there. And then if I change this to be a boost, I say boost wide, so you can see that's a narrow boost, that's a wider boost. That's another general rule. Again, it's only a guideline, so it may not always be applicable, but cut, narrow, boost, wide. Okay, then into stage 6, which is compression. Very brief explanation of compression. If you've got a track that's got a wide range of volumes, so it goes very quiet and very loud, what compression does make the quieter parts louder and the louder parts quieter. So instead of having that big range of volumes, you get a shorter range of volumes. And what that's going to do is make it easier for that track to sit in your mix consistently, rather than you always having to fight with the volume on that track and pulling the volume up when it's very low and pulling the volume down where it's very high. So I've got some compression on the piano tracks here. Reaper's compression plugin built in is very good. It's called Rear Comp. Let's just open that there. And let's just play the track. Now what you can see happening there is, see this little red bar coming down? So every time you see that coming down, it's reducing the volume of one of the higher volume bits. That's it really. Now I'm not going to go through a detailed tutorial on compression. Again, there's loads of those online and on YouTube. You can give yourself a bit of a head start by using one of the presets as a starting point before you mess around with the parameters. I've actually used an acoustic guitar preset on the piano here. And what you'll end up doing is playing your track and just controlling the threshold here. So if I pull this right down, the piano will go a lot quieter. and you can see it's really, really clamping down on those louder volumes. Now, if I push it back up, the piano will go louder. So that's how you will basically use compression, is control that threshold parameter so you get to a level where your track is sitting nicely in the mix. The other thing you can do is use, let's just start that again, it's called makeup gain. So if I use this control, you can hear it going louder. What we're effectively doing there is the volume at the top has come down, and then we're lifting the whole volume of the track back up again. That's what I mean by squashing the signal. Okay, we're nearly there now. Stage 7 is automation. Now, as you're going through your track and you're moving the faders up and down to get everything at the right volume, you may find that there's one track that you have to do that a lot on. You have to, okay, this bit needs to be louder, but this bit needs to be quieter. Oh, this bit needs to be louder again. This needs to be very quiet. And you find yourself throughout the entire mix constantly moving the faders up and down. And if you've got that on more than one track, well, you're scuppered really, because how do you move quickly between tracks? What you can do is use automation to record those moves you've made on the fader and play them back, so you don't have to move the fader manually. Now in this track I didn't use any automation because I didn't need to, it just didn't need it. So let's form a quick example there. Let's take the drums track. We click on this trim button. You can see all the parameters we can control with automation. Volume is one of the most common ones. If we, where it says automation mode, select right here, what this will do is any moves I make on the fader, it will record them. So let's just play the song and I'll move the fader as it's playing. So you can hear I took the drums right down there and brought them right back up again. And you can see that that's made this curve here, that volume automation curve. If we then select this again and now change that back to trim stroke read, what that will do is it will read back those volume moves that I made on the fader. So have a listen. I'm not doing anything to the fader at all now. Here are my hands. And you can hear the move that I did make on the fader is now being played back without me actually having to move the fader manually. Okay, so we're at the last stage now. We've done our EQ and compression, any automation necessary, all after we've done our first initial basic static mix. We're now on to mixing down to a stereo track. So in Reaper, that's very, very simple. If we go to File, Render, and there's a few different settings set. You can choose how much of this track you want to render. So you could have the time selection. So just if I selected that much to that entire project, and in stereo. So there you go. You have your anything fighting for space in the mix. Anything that overpowers everything else.